Hello everyone. Today, I bring you an incredible film called The Master and Margarita. The story unfolds in 1930s Moscow. One quiet night in an old building, a security guard on duty suddenly sensed someone's presence. But when he looked around, there was no one there. An invisible force had entered the room, no ordinary force, but a spirit searching for something lost. The items in the room began scattering, tossing and turning as if moved by unseen hands. By the time the room's owner, Comrade Litovsky, arrived, everything was already in disarray. Strangely, the spirit did not scare anyone. Instead, it laughed and began telling its story to an unknown child. However, this was not just a real-life incident, it was part of a book being written by a writer named the Master. The Master was staying in a mental health center, completely immersed in writing his story. His book was more than just a work of fiction, it was a reflection of his dreams and emotions. A nurse working at the center would eagerly await the day he finished the book. As he wrote, the Master became so lost in his imagination that he began creating entire new worlds before his very eyes. He lived through his words, conversing with his characters. One of these characters was a poet who had once been a famous writer. Like the Master, this poet had once been a member of the Writers' Union. He had written a play based on the story of Roman governor Pontius Pilate, the same Pilate who ordered the death of Jesus Christ. Preparations were underway for the play's premiere, and everyone eagerly anticipated its debut. But when the Master learned that the government had banned the play, his world shook. Authorities claimed that the play contained ideas contrary to their beliefs and that its content should not reach the public. Attempts were made to speak with the theater manager, but no response was given. The Master's editor, Mikhail, was stunned to learn that the play had been labeled dangerous. The issue reached the Writers' Union, but even there, the Master was denied a chance to defend himself. His work was mocked, his books and words deemed threatening. The Master felt utterly alone. His freedom had been taken from him. Yet he refused to submit. He left the Union and found a new companion in Aloy, a man who truly understood his thoughts. From that day, a deep friendship blossomed between them. Still, the fire of rebellion burned in the Master's heart. He began seeking out others willing to stand with him against censorship. In a club, he found several individuals ready to support his cause. But at that very moment, a mysterious man approached him. The Master was then escorted out of the club, told that he no longer belonged to the Union. Outside, he encountered a mysterious German man who introduced himself as Woland. Woland told the Master to abandon stories about God and instead write a story where the devil comes to earth to change the world of humans himself. His words were enigmatic, and he hinted that he would return with the woman closest to the Master's heart. Freedom is the most precious thing for anyone. But imagine if a writer's voice is silenced and their thoughts suppressed, it is like a death to the soul. With this realization, the Master, broken yet alive, began contemplating ending his own life. He had severed his connection with his pen and words. It was then that Margarita, a magical and captivating woman, intervened. There was something in her eyes that drew the Master in, and from that day, their relationship deepened. They spent hours together, sharing stories and dreams. The Master confided in her about a new novel he was about to write, a story he had never attempted before. This novel was deeply personal, reflecting his life, his pain, his struggles, and his desires. The novel begins with Mikhail and Ivan. Mikhail, an editor, and Ivan, a poet, were engaged in a discussion about Jesus and his teachings. During their conversation, they met Woland, a mysterious figure who was, in truth, the devil himself. Woland felt a peculiar joy in interacting with atheists, yet he wanted to convince them that powers like God and Satan truly govern the world. Woland warned Mikhail that his life would end tragically, and it did. As Mikhail tried to call for help, he encountered two strange individuals, lost his balance, and fell on the tram tracks. His death unfolded exactly as Woland had predicted. The Master wove this entire incident into his story, not merely as fiction, but as a form of vengeance against those who had ruined him. This inspiration came after meeting Margarita, who listened to every word he spoke and read every line he wrote. Meanwhile, another character in the Master's story, Ivan, began to suspect that Woland was not just the devil but also a spy responsible for Mikhail's death. He started to pursue Woland, only to encounter a strange cat instead. The cat led him to a government club, where he tried to reveal the truth about Mikhail's death and Woland's presence. Yet, no one believed him, and he was declared insane and committed to a mental hospital. Here, it becomes clear that the Master himself. It becomes clear that the mental hospital, along with the characters Ivan and the Master, is not real, it exists solely within the novel the Master is writing. The Master is completely immersed in his own story, and Margarita tries to understand every nuance of his writing. She notices that within the novel, Wolin narrates the story of Pilate, the same Pilate who ordered Jesus' crucifixion. In the story, Pilate receives orders to execute 4 Jews who refuse to adopt Roman religion, one of whom is Jesus. Yet, Pilate is instructed that he can pardon only one, a criminal named Barabbas. Margarita, reading this, becomes puzzled and asks the master why he included Pilate in his story. The master explains that this was the same play that had caused him the greatest defeat in his life. The play, based on Pilate's story, had been banned by the government, and it was this censorship that ultimately compelled him to write this novel. Some time later, the master is called to the theater. On the way, he tells Margarita that his next chapter will focus on a man named Spand. Spand had refused to help him and was a selfish, greedy man, entirely absorbed in his own pleasures. In the master's story, Wolin visits Spand's house and terrifies him to the point of mental ruin. The master's words are more than just a story, they are the fire of his heart, an attempt to reshape the world around him. Margarita, who can sense the master's soul in every line, becomes his greatest strength. The novel evolves beyond a mere book, it becomes a symbol of the master's very existence. Freedom is humanity's greatest treasure, yet when it is taken away and one's art and expression are suppressed, one becomes a living shell. The master embodies this struggle. Through his words and stories, he confronts a tyrannical world determined to silence him. One day, the master is devastated to discover that all the posters for his play have been torn down. Despite months of effort, he receives only a month's salary. Financial hardship forces him to sell even his own books. In this dark time, only Margarita remains his light. She comforts and encourages him, becoming not only a part of his life but an essential character in his story. The master tells her that he will include her as a witch in his novel, a witch who can invisibly observe the world. Their conversations and shared moments become intertwined with both their lives and the story itself. Gradually, the master began to lose the distinction between reality and imagination. Margarita had become such an integral part of his life that his story and his own existence began to intertwine. Yet, he was troubled, he could not fully claim Margarita for himself, as he was already married. Margarita, however, was willing to leave everything behind to be with him. The master, though, did not want her life to be ruined because of him. One night, the master shared with Aloy a part of his story featuring the character of Pilate. Aloy felt that Pilate symbolized the political climate of the time, which likely explained why the government had banned the master's play. Within his imagination, the master also introduced Wolin, a mysterious figure who could alter everything according to his will. One day, Wolin invited the master to witness a play. The master became so absorbed in the performance that he imagined Wolin, along with his companions, punishing the master's enemies. Wolin stirred greed among the citizens by distributing money and then mocked that very greed. He even plotted to use an actor named George as a puppet for his schemes. When the master returned from this imaginative trance, he saw Margarita, who took him outside the next day, determined to free him from his confined life. Yet, their troubles were far from over. Wolin later took the master to a party where he witnessed communist leaders being ridiculed, which inspired the master to consider concluding his story. But this story itself landed him in danger. Wolin warned him that his work was dangerous. One night, Soviet soldiers stormed the master's door. He was forced to burn his entire book because his story opposed the Soviet regime. Even then, this did not protect him. Someone had informed the government about the master's manuscript, leading to his arrest. Authorities accused Margarita of treason, an allegation the master never accepted. During interrogations, he was told that no one named Wolin existed and that he was entirely alone, and that everything he had experienced was merely a product of his imagination. The line between the master's life and his story blurred so completely that he could no longer distinguish reality from fantasy. His characters came alive before his eyes, and one day, when he finally saw Wolin in Moscow, he was certain that this was the very devil he had created in his words. Soon, Wolin's dark influence began spreading through the streets of Moscow, and the master was accused of treason. The master was told that the only way to save his life was to abandon his thoughts and story and become a loyal communist writer. But he refused outright. He declared that Wolin awaited him and that his death had already been predetermined. The government placed him in a mental ward, where he spent his days and nights thinking about Margarita and his unfinished novel. Though his condition deteriorated, he did not stop, he began writing his book again. A nurse secretly assisted him, keeping her involvement hidden, and eventually, he completed his story. Meanwhile, Margarita desperately searched for the master. She discovered that Aloy was now living in the master's house and quickly realized he was a traitor. Before his imprisonment, the master had entrusted the manuscript of his novel to the nurse, with instructions that if Margarita ever came looking for him, the book should be given to her. When Margarita learned of the master's whereabouts in the hospital, she rushed there. Though she was not allowed to meet him, she was handed the book. Immersed in its pages, she entered the same world where the master had once been lost. Within the story, Woland, the devil, summoned Margarita, granting her extraordinary powers, including invisibility and the ability to fly. Using these powers, she began exacting revenge on those who had destroyed the master's life. For a time, Woland made her his queen, bringing before her the sinners of the world and revealing their crimes. In reality, Margarita was intoxicated with wine, merging her experience with the fantastical events of the story. At the story's climax, the man most responsible for the master's suffering appeared. Woland killed him and drank his blood, even asking Margarita to partake. As she drank, she fainted. When she awoke, Woland told her that she could ask for anything, but every desire would come at a cost. Initially, Margarita hesitated, but finally, she wished to be reunited with her master. Woland fulfilled her wish. By the end of the novel, the master and Margarita were united. All of the master's enemies were vanquished, and Moscow, once a symbol of greed and oppression, was utterly destroyed. Margarita reclaimed her love, and their bond became eternal. Like the novel itself, their love story transcended death, immortalized in both reality and fiction. And with that, our story comes to an end. Thank you for watching this recap, and in the next video, we'll explore another amazing tale with the same detailed explanation. Until then, stay tuned.